A new dawn for our deserts is brewing in the vacuum of space. Giant orbital mirrors could transform these barren lands into the ultimate power plants for Earth and Mars. This is not a fantasy. It is the revolutionary promise of orbital solar mirror technology. By the end of this exploration, you will understand how we can literally redirect sunlight from orbit to energize our world and future colonies. We will uncover how a mirror floating in space can hit a target hundreds of miles below, and what happens when we decide to give a desert a second sun. Does humanity have the right to re-engineer the very light that reaches a planet? Our star showers Earth with more energy in a single hour than our entire civilization uses in a year. This staggering surplus is the silent backdrop to our daily lives, a torrent of power that mostly washes over the planet unused. Think of the sun not as a distant ball of light, but as the ultimate power outlet for our world, left permanently switched on. The most logical places to plug in are the deserts, immense landscapes that already receive a relentless, unfiltered deluge of this energy. They are nature's ready-made solar farms, yet they remain largely silent and still. The problem has never been a lack of light, but our inability to harness it consistently. On the ground, solar panels fall dormant every night, their potential cut short by the planet's own shadow. They are blinded by clouds, slowed by dust, and silenced by weather. This intermittent nature is the fundamental bottleneck of terrestrial solar power. What if we could bypass this limitation entirely? Orbital mirrors propose a radical solution. Instead of collecting sunlight after it has been filtered and interrupted by our atmosphere, we can capture it at the source, in the pristine emptiness of space. Up there, the sun never sets. There is no night, no weather, no atmospheric diffusion to weaken its pure, constant stream. This is the paradigm shift. It is the difference between trying to collect rainwater with a cup during a sporadic downpour and building a vast aqueduct that taps directly into the clouds. By placing a mirror in orbit, we gain the ultimate strategic advantage, a permanent, unobstructed line to our star. The mirror becomes a celestial director, catching that endless flood of photons and bending their path with precision, sending a focused beam of sunlight down to a waiting solar farm in the desert below, even in the middle of the night. This is not merely an upgrade to existing technology. It is a complete reimagining of our relationship with solar energy. The sheer scale of power available makes this astronomical endeavor not just a possibility, but an inevitable step in our evolution. The same principle that lets you see your face in a mirror is the bedrock of this celestial technology. That fundamental rule, the angle of incidence equals the angle of reflection, is what makes the entire concept possible. A beam of light hits a smooth surface and bounces off at an identical angle. It is a simple, elegant law we learn as children. Yet when we scale this principle from a handheld looking glass to a structure the size of a city floating in the void, its elegant simplicity transforms into a monumental challenge. These orbital reflectors would not be made of glass and silver. They would be vast, gossamer thin films, kilometers across and lighter than a feather, designed to unfurl in the weightlessness of space. Their sole purpose is to act as a celestial pivot, catching the unfiltered radiance of the sun and angling it with absolute precision toward a predetermined patch of desert far below. Think of it not as a single mirror, but as a dynamic, orbiting lighthouse. Its beam is not a warning, but a gift of pure sunlight directed to a solar farm waiting in the darkness. The mirror must perform a constant, silent dance. It must rotate and adjust its position with microscopic accuracy, keeping its face perfectly aligned with the sun on one side, and its reflection perfectly aimed at a target hundreds of miles away on the other, all while hurtling through orbit at thousands of miles per hour. A miscalculation of even a fraction of a degree would send its life-giving beam wandering off into empty ocean or uninhabited mountain ranges, completely missing the mark. This is where basic physics meets a breathtaking engineering ballet. The mirror itself is just the performer, but who is the choreographer? What invisible hand guides its flawless movements to ensure that beam of light lands exactly where we need it, day after day, year after year? That invisible choreographer is a symphony of physics and engineering, a silent, automated intelligence dedicated to one single task, keeping the mirror perfectly on target. Placing a structure that large into orbit is a monumental achievement, but it is only the first step. The real challenge begins once it is up there, in the unforgiving environment of space. The orbit we choose is our first strategic decision. For a mirror meant to provide constant, reliable light to a single desert region, a geostationary orbit is ideal. From 22,000 miles above the Earth, the mirror would appear to hang motionless over one spot, providing uninterrupted coverage. Alternatively, a sun-synchronous orbit would ensure the mirror always crosses over the desert at the same local time each day, offering a predictable and consistent boost of sunlight. But even in these carefully selected paths, nothing is ever truly still. The mirror is locked in a perpetual tug of war with invisible forces. The gentle but persistent gravity of the moon and the sun constantly tugs at its structure, trying to pull it off its assigned path. The faint pressure of sunlight itself, photons physically pushing against the vast reflective surface, acts like a silent solar wind. Even at those altitudes, the wispy outermost tendrils of our atmosphere exert a tiny, continuous drag. Left unchecked, these subtle nudges would slowly but surely push our celestial lighthouse off course, its beam of light drifting away from the solar farm and into oblivion. To counter this, the mirror is equipped with its own nervous system, a station-keeping system of ultra-efficient ion thrusters or spinning reaction wheels. These are not powerful engines for large maneuvers, but delicate fingertips constantly making micro-adjustments. They fire for mere milliseconds, exerting a whisper of force to counteract a drift measured in millimeters per second. This is not an occasional correction, it is a perpetual, automated dance, a ballet of precision happening every second of every day. It is this relentless, unseen effort that allows the mirror to hold its aim with unwavering focus, ensuring the beam of concentrated sunlight remains a reliable tool, not a wandering novelty. But once that perfectly aimed beam is racing toward Earth, it faces its greatest trial, a fiery descent through the planet's protective shield. The journey of that concentrated beam of light is a race against atmospheric interference. As it slices down from the pristine silence of orbit, it must punch through the turbulent, gaseous blanket of our atmosphere. This is the moment of truth where a perfectly aimed signal can be scattered, absorbed, or distorted. The air itself acts like a lens of varying thickness, bending the light in unpredictable ways. To ensure the beam arrives as a powerful, focused circle of illumination and not a weak, diffused glow, the mirror must employ a brilliant countermeasure, adaptive optics. Imagine the mirror's surface is not a rigid sheet, but a dynamic skin composed of thousands of tiny, adjustable segments. These segments act like an array of independent fingertips, constantly tweaking their angle in response to real-time data about atmospheric conditions. They are compensating for the air's turbulence, actively reshaping the beam to keep it tightly focused all the way down to its desert target. This transforms the mirror from a simple reflector into a smart, responsive instrument, fighting the chaos of the atmosphere with calculated precision. But what is this celestial instrument even made of? It certainly is not glass, which would be far too heavy and fragile for such an endeavor. The most promising candidates are marvels of modern materials science, incredibly thin reflective polymer films like Mylar or Captain. These are the same types of resilient materials used in spacesuits and satellite insulation. They are chosen for a critical trifecta of properties: their high reflectivity to bounce as much sunlight as possible, their extreme lightness to make launch costs feasible, and their incredible resilience against the harsh space environment. They must withstand relentless bombardment by micrometeoroids, tiny specks of dust traveling at astronomical speeds, and intense, degrading ultraviolet radiation from the sun. To support this vast gossamer film, the mirror needs a skeleton. Its structure could be an ultra-lightweight truss, a geometric web of carbon fiber that unfolds in orbit like a piece of cosmic origami. Another design proposes an inflatable frame where rigidizing polymers expand into a sturdy support structure. Some of the most ambitious concepts move away from a single, monolithic mirror altogether. They envision a cloud of smaller, coordinated mirror satellites, a concept known as a satellite constellation. This swarm approach offers significant advantages, including built-in redundancy. If one small mirror fails, the others can compensate, and it allows for easier, incremental deployment using smaller, more frequent rocket launches. The entire design is a masterclass in balancing conflicting demands, achieving immense size while remaining almost weightless, providing a flawless reflective surface while surviving a perpetual storm of cosmic debris. This intricate balance of materials and design raises a profound question. What happens when that perfectly crafted beam of light finally meets the ground? That beam of concentrated sunlight has a very specific destination, a concentrated solar power plant waiting in the desert. This is not about simply illuminating a vast area of sand. It is about precise surgical energy delivery. Think of a CSP plant as a colossal ground-based power factory. Its landscape is covered with thousands of large, flat mirrors called heliostats. Each one is a sun-tracking device, constantly tilting and turning to catch the sun's rays and reflect them onto a single, central tower. All that collective light is focused into a searing point of heat, so intense it can superheat a special fluid, often molten salt, inside the tower to temperatures exceeding 1,000 degrees Fahrenheit. This incredibly hot molten salt then becomes a thermal battery, storing that captured heat for hours. It is used to create steam, which spins turbines, generating electricity on demand, even after the sun has set. This is where the orbital mirror completes the circuit. It acts as a single, gargantuan heliostat in the sky, a celestial partner to the thousands on the ground. Its reflected beam hits the central tower with the same focused intensity, but it does so from a source that never sleeps. During the critical hours of dawn and dusk, when the ground-based heliostats are at their least effective, the orbital mirror supercharges the entire operation. On cloudy days when the terrestrial system struggles, the beam from space cuts through the overcast, delivering pure, unfiltered solar power directly to the receiver. This synergy transforms the entire concept of solar energy. The ground plant provides the robust thermal storage and conversion machinery, while the orbital mirror provides a reliable, all-hours fuel delivery service. Together, they bridge the gap between intermittent sunlight and the constant, unwavering demand for electricity. This partnership elevates solar power from a part-time contributor to a baseload power source, as dependable as a traditional coal or nuclear plant, but with zero emissions. The dream of a truly continuous, high-output solar grid hinges on this perfect handshake between an engineering marvel on the ground and a celestial sun dial in the sky. But what does this mean for the desert itself, a landscape we are fundamentally altering? Threading a needle from the edge of space requires a system of almost unimaginable precision. From its vantage point in geostationary orbit, over 35,000 kilometers high, the mirror must aim its beam at a target on the ground that may be only a few hundred meters across. A miscalculation equivalent to the width of a human hair at the mirror could translate into the beam missing the receiver by miles. To achieve this, the mirror relies on a suite of technologies working in perfect harmony. Its internal guidance system uses star trackers and ultra-precise gyroscopes to know its own orientation in the void with absolute certainty, much like a ship's captain using the stars to navigate. Its position relative to Earth is constantly tracked by global navigation satellite systems, the same technology that powers the maps on your phone, but refined to an atomic level of accuracy. This data alone is not enough, however. The final, most critical layer of precision comes from the ground. The solar power plant itself would be equipped with a sophisticated beacon system, a kind of luminous bullseye that shines up toward the mirror. This beacon provides real-time feedback, a constant stream of data saying you are on target or you are drifting slightly west. This creates a closed-loop control system. The mirror is not just pointing and hoping, it is listening and responding. Its array of tiny, adjustable segments makes micro-corrections thousands of times per second, actively steering the beam to counteract any drift caused by the subtle forces acting on the structure. This is not a one-way signal, it is a continuous conversation between the sky and the ground, a dialogue that ensures the immense power of the sun is delivered with the gentle precision of a surgeon's hand. The consequence of a failure in this conversation is what makes the targeting so critical. If that beam were to stray, it would not simply vanish. A misaligned beam, even for a few minutes, could potentially sweep across the landscape, delivering intense, concentrated sunlight to areas never meant to receive it. While it would not be a laser capable of slicing through cities, it could start fires, damage infrastructure, or disrupt local ecosystems. This is why the safety systems are designed with multiple, redundant layers. The ground station would have the ultimate authority to shut down the reception if the beam strayed outside a strict safety perimeter, and the mirror itself would have autonomous fail-safes programmed to defocus or move its beam to a harmless point in the ocean if it ever lost the guiding signal from Earth. This relentless, automated vigilance is the non-negotiable price of wielding such power from the heavens. It transforms the concept from a dangerous experiment into a reliable utility. But this incredible feat of orbital marksmanship is only one part of a much larger equation. The atmosphere is our planet's final filter, a protective veil that now stands between the orbiting mirror and its purpose on the ground. As that concentrated beam of sunlight races downward, it does not pass through empty space. It plunges into a turbulent ocean of air, a medium that absorbs and scatters its energy. This is the challenge of atmospheric attenuation, the silent thief of solar power. The journey is not equally difficult for all colors of light. Our atmosphere is relatively transparent to the visible spectrum, the light our eyes can see, allowing it to pass through with ease. But other wavelengths, like infrared light, which carries a great deal of heat, are more readily absorbed and scattered by the very molecules that make up our air. This means the beam of light that reaches the ground is not a perfect replica of the one that left the mirror. It is a filtered version with some of its most energetic components stripped away. Engineers must account for this loss with meticulous precision. calculating exactly how much power will be diminished on its descent to ensure the final delivery meets the needs of the power plant below. Beyond mere power loss, the beam itself introduces a new element into the sky. While it is not a coherent cutting laser, it is still a powerful river of concentrated energy. Its very presence could theoretically influence the local environment it passes through. Scientists must ask profound questions. Could the heat from the beam subtly affect local air currents or even cloud formation in its immediate path? Might its specific light wavelengths trigger unexpected chemical reactions in the upper atmosphere? And critically, what is its impact on the busy airways below? The path of the beam would be a carefully controlled and permanent no-fly zone for aircraft, a necessary precaution to ensure that nothing enters a column of space that has, for all practical purposes, become a dedicated energy highway. This transforms the challenge from a purely orbital engineering feat into a complex puzzle of atmospheric science. We are not just building a mirror in space, we are learning how to safely thread a needle of pure sunlight through the dynamic, living system of our own sky. Every calculation must consider the air itself as an active participant, a variable that can dilute, distort, and interact with the power we are trying to deliver. This intricate dance with our atmosphere reveals that the true test of this technology lies not in the silent void of space, but in the thin, gaseous frontier where our world begins. The true potential of this celestial partnership becomes clear when we see it applied to a real-world giant. On the edge of the Sahara Desert in Morocco, the Noor Ouarzazate Solar Complex stands as a testament to what terrestrial solar power can already achieve. Its vast fields of mirrors concentrate the desert sun onto towering receivers, powering hundreds of thousands of homes. Yet, like all ground-based plants, it is bound by the rhythm of the planet, its output falling to zero each night. Now envision this same facility with a partner in the sky. An orbital mirror, perfectly synchronized with the complex, would begin its work just as the sun dips below the horizon. While the ground-based heliostats go dark, the mirror in space would catch the last rays of sunlight and bend them down to the central tower. This would not be a dim glow, but a beam of full-intensity solar power, arriving precisely when the grid needs it most, during the evening energy demand peak. The plant would continue to superheat its molten salt reserves, generating electricity deep into the night. Then, as dawn approaches and the terrestrial mirrors are still ineffective at the low sun angle, the orbital mirror would once again deliver a focused beam, jump-starting power production hours earlier than normal. This simple augmentation could effectively double the plant's daily operational window. The result is not a minor efficiency gain, but a radical transformation of its entire economic and operational model. The complex shifts from a part-time energy supplier to a near-constant baseload power source. Its total energy output could skyrocket, making solar power the undisputed backbone of a regional grid, displacing fossil fuel plants that were once needed to cover the nighttime gap. This single case study reveals the core strategy. We do not need to replace our impressive earthly infrastructure. We simply need to give it a second sun. The question then becomes, if we can achieve this on Earth, what does this same technology promise for a world with an even greater need for managed sunlight? The sheer scale of this ambition comes with an equally massive price tag. Launching thousands of tons of delicate mirror material into orbit remains the single greatest financial barrier, a venture currently estimated to cost hundreds of billions, perhaps even trillions of dollars. It is an almost unimaginable sum, enough to make any economist pause. But this number only tells one side of the story. We must weigh it against the long-term costs of our current energy path, the relentless trillions spent on fossil fuels, the environmental damage, and the geopolitical instability tied to finite resources. An orbital mirror system offers something entirely different, a one-time infrastructure investment that unlocks a near-limitless stream of clean energy for centuries. Its value is not just in the electricity it generates, but in the stability it creates. Imagine a world where the price of power is no longer subject to the volatile whims of the global market or the depletion of underground reserves. This technology promises energy independence on a global scale, providing reliable, high-intensity power to remote desert communities that have never been connected to a traditional grid. The economic equation is rapidly shifting in its favor. The same reusable rocket technology that is slashing launch costs by orders of magnitude is making the logistics feasible. Simultaneously, as governments and industries place a rising monetary value on carbon-neutral energy through carbon taxes and green incentives, the payoff for such a monumental project grows clearer and more compelling. This is not a simple purchase. It is a high-risk, high-reward investment in the very foundation of our civilization's future. It is a bet on breaking our dependence on ancient sunlight stored in fossil fuels and learning to harvest the live, endless stream from the sky. Yet, even if we solve the economic puzzle, a more profound question awaits, one that challenges our very right to reshape a planetary environment. This new sun would not rise over an empty canvas. Deserts are not the barren wastelands we sometimes imagine, but ancient, finely balanced ecosystems that have adapted to a specific rhythm of light and dark. Introducing a concentrated beam of energy, even with the best intentions, is like adding a new instrument to a silent symphony. The potential for unintended consequences is profound. The most immediate effect would be a localized increase in temperature around the receiving station. While the heat is intended for the power plant's molten salt, some would inevitably radiate outwards, creating a persistent thermal hotspot in the desert night. This artificial warmth could disrupt the behavior of the many creatures that have evolved for the cool, dark desert evenings. Nocturnal animals like foxes, insects, and reptiles rely on the temperature drop to become active, to hunt, and to breed. A permanent, warmer zone could alter these patterns, potentially driving species away from an area they have called home for millennia. The light itself is another powerful ecological signal. Many plants use the length of the day and night to time their flowering and growth cycles. A constant, artificial glow could confuse these internal clocks, leading to unexpected changes in the local plant life. Even the air itself might respond. The intense, focused heat from the beam could, in theory, create very localized updrafts, potentially influencing micro-weather patterns, perhaps even encouraging the formation of strange, isolated clouds or altering the way the morning dew forms. Before a single mirror is launched, a comprehensive environmental impact assessment would be an absolute necessity. Scientists would need to study everything, from the fragile microbial crusts that hold the desert soil together to the high-altitude migration paths of birds that might inadvertently fly through the periphery of the beam. The goal of limitless clean energy is a noble one, but it cannot come at the cost of sacrificing the intricate, living world we are trying to preserve. This forces us to confront a deeper ethical question, one that will only grow louder as our technological reach extends. Do we have the right to re-engineer the fundamental environmental conditions of a planet, even for a noble cause? The legal landscape for such a project is as vast and untamed as space itself. Who, indeed, has the right to hang a second sun in the sky? The foundational document governing all space activities is the Outer Space Treaty of 1967, a product of the Cold War era that declares space the province of all mankind. This noble principle means no single nation can claim sovereignty over orbital paths or celestial bodies. However, the treaty was drafted long before anyone seriously contemplated engineering projects on this scale. It provides a philosophical framework for peaceful exploration, but it is utterly silent on the practicalities of a structure that could fundamentally alter the amount of sunlight reaching a nation's territory. A private company or a single powerful country could not simply launch a mirror and begin beaming energy across international borders. Such an act would be seen as a profound violation of national sovereignty, an uninvited modification of another country's environment from space. The diplomatic fallout would be immediate and severe. This forces a simple, inescapable truth. The success of orbital mirrors depends as much on global treaties as it does on titanium and carbon fiber. We would need to build a new framework of international law before we could even begin to build the mirror itself. This new legal architecture would have to tackle questions we have never faced before. Who grants the license for such a project? An international body, perhaps a strengthened United Nations Office for Outer Space Affairs, would likely need to be created to oversee the approval process, ensuring that any deployment considers the interests of all nations, not just the one funding the launch. The framework would need to establish strict rules for operation and liability. What happens if the beam accidentally strays and causes damage? The operating nation or corporation would need to be held accountable under a clear, universally agreed set of laws. Beyond the physical risks, more subtle concerns would arise. Astronomers might raise the alarm about space light pollution, arguing that a constellation of brilliant mirrors could interfere with their observations of the distant universe. Environmentalists and cultural groups could champion a new right, the right to an unaltered sky. For millennia, the sun and the stars have been constants for human civilization, dictating our rhythms and inspiring our cultures. Do we have the right to change that fundamental experience for everyone on the planet, even with the best of intentions? These are not minor technicalities. They are profound questions that strike at the heart of global cooperation. The mirror becomes a test, a challenge to see if humanity can unite around a shared goal, or if we will remain fractured, looking up at a sky we are not yet mature enough to shape. The silent void of space is far from empty. It is a shooting gallery. Orbiting our planet are millions of pieces of debris, from spent rocket stages to flecks of paint, all traveling at speeds exceeding 17,000 miles per hour. At that velocity, a single screw carries the kinetic energy of a hand grenade. A structure as vast and fragile as an orbital mirror would present the largest target ever placed in this hazardous environment. A direct hit from even a small piece of this shrapnel could be catastrophic, not just for the mirror itself, but for the entire orbital neighborhood. The impact would not simply punch a hole, it would vaporize a section of the delicate film, instantly generating a new, expanding cloud of razor-sharp fragments. This cloud would then become a secondary threat, a shotgun blast traveling at orbital speeds, endangering every satellite, every space station, and every future mission in its path. This is the domino effect of space debris, where one collision can potentially trigger a chain reaction, rendering entire orbital pathways unusable for generations. To survive in this environment, the mirror's design cannot rely on luck. It must be built with an unwavering philosophy of redundancy and resilience. The most robust solution may be to move away from the concept of a single, monolithic mirror altogether. Instead, engineers envision a distributed constellation, a swarm of hundreds or even thousands of smaller, interconnected mirror satellites. This approach provides inherent redundancy. If one small mirror in the swarm is destroyed by debris, the others can automatically adjust their positions and reflections to compensate, ensuring the flow of power to the ground is merely diminished, not completely severed. The loss of one soldier does not lose the war. Each individual mirror in this constellation would also be far easier to shield. They could be equipped with Whipple shields, a simple yet brilliant defensive technology. Imagine a spaced armor system where a thin outer bumper sits a few inches away from the main body of the satellite. When a piece of debris hits the bumper, it vaporizes on impact, spreading its energy into a wider, slower cloud of plasma that then harmlessly splatters against the main hull. This is passive defense at its most elegant, turning the immense speed of the impactor into its own downfall. But even the best defenses cannot last forever. This brings us to the final, critical responsibility for any structure we place in the heavens, its end of life. We cannot simply abandon a city-sized object in orbit once its operational lifetime is over. It must have a pre-programmed death sentence, a fail-safe plan for its own dignified disposal. At the end of its service, which might span decades, the mirror would activate its thrusters for one final burn. One option is to push it upward, into a graveyard orbit hundreds of miles above the busiest orbital pathways, a remote celestial junkyard where it will drift harmlessly for millennia. The other, more decisive option is to guide it on a controlled descent back into Earth's atmosphere. As it plummets downward, the immense friction of re-entry would generate temperatures hotter than the surface of the Sun, causing the vast structure to disintegrate completely in a brilliant, final fireworks display over a remote, uninhabited stretch of ocean. This is not just about cleaning up after ourselves, it is a fundamental promise to future generations. We must prove that we can harness the power of the sky without permanently polluting it, ensuring that the pathways to the stars remain open and safe for the explorers and innovators who will follow. This meticulous planning for a structure's entire life cycle, from its birth in a rocket's payload fairing to its fiery death decades later, is what separates a sustainable vision from a reckless gamble. It acknowledges that our reach into the cosmos must be matched by an equal measure of responsibility. Mars presents a far more compelling case for this technology than Earth ever could. The red planet exists in a perpetual state of energy famine, receiving less than half the sunlight we enjoy, while its wispy atmosphere provides a pitiful defense against the relentless radiation of deep space. For any future colonists, this is a double bind, a choice between power poverty and lethal exposure. Orbital mirrors here are not an upgrade, they are a foundational tool for survival. A constellation of these reflectors could be strategically positioned to perform two critical, life-giving functions simultaneously. Their primary role would be to act as celestial boosters, concentrating the weak Martian sunlight onto vast arrays of solar panels deployed across the surface. This would provide the consistent, high-intensity power needed to run habitats, manufacture breathable air, and produce fuel, transforming a precarious outpost into a viable industrial settlement. Yet their second function is even more profound. They hold the key to awakening the planet itself. Mars's poles are locked in deep freeze, containing immense reserves of water ice and, crucially, frozen carbon dioxide. By carefully aiming mirrors to focus sunlight onto these icy deposits, we could trigger a controlled sublimation, turning the dry ice directly from a solid into a gas. This process would pump vast quantities of carbon dioxide back into the Martian atmosphere, beginning a slow but deliberate planetary metamorphosis. A thicker CO2 blanket would initiate a greenhouse effect, trapping what little solar heat the planet receives and raising global temperatures. This initial warming could then release even more greenhouse gases in a positive feedback loop, a chain reaction that would, over centuries, thicken the atmosphere to the point where liquid water could once again flow on the surface. On Mars, these mirrors are more than power stations. They are the first gentle push on a planetary scale, the spark intended to ignite a world's long dormant engine. They represent the difference between humanity huddling in pressurized domes and one day walking under an open, albeit manufactured, sky. This ambition to reshape a world is the ultimate expression of our technological reach. We are no longer talking about powering a city, but about jump-starting an entire planetary ecosystem. The concept is terraforming, a word that carries the weight of science fiction epics, but which orbital mirrors could transform into a tangible, albeit distant, engineering project. Mars stands as the prime candidate, a cold, silent world waiting for a push. Its thin atmosphere offers little warmth and less protection, and its poles are frozen vaults containing immense reserves of water ice and carbon dioxide. This is the key. Orbital mirrors could be precisely aimed to focus sunlight onto these polar caps, not for power generation, but for a deliberate, controlled melt. The goal would be to sublimate the frozen carbon dioxide, turning it directly from ice into gas and releasing it into the Martian atmosphere. This act, repeated over decades, would be like adding the first logs to a planetary-scale fireplace. Carbon dioxide is a potent greenhouse gas. As more of it enters the thin Martian air, it would begin to trap the sun's feeble heat, raising the planet's average temperature degree by painstaking degree. This initial warming would then release more CO2 from the soil and ice, which would trap more heat in a powerful positive feedback loop. Over centuries, this runaway greenhouse effect could theoretically thicken the atmosphere enough to raise surface pressure, block harmful radiation, and allow liquid water to flow again in certain conditions. This is not a project for a single generation or even 10. It is a multi-millennial endeavor, a promise made by one age of humanity to all the ages that follow. It demonstrates a shift in our vision from being visitors on other worlds to becoming their stewards and architects. The mirror, in this context, is no longer a simple tool, but a Genesis engine, offering the first gentle nudge to awaken a sleeping world. The very idea of a beam of concentrated energy arriving from the heavens is a narrative deeply embedded in our collective consciousness, and not always in a peaceful way. This technology, designed for life-giving power, will inevitably brush against our deepest-seated fears. The question is simple and stark: could this celestial lighthouse be turned into a death ray? The physics provides a powerful and reassuring answer. To focus enough thermal energy to cause meaningful damage from geostationary orbit, over 22,000 miles away, is a challenge of almost unimaginable scale. The mirror would need to be orders of magnitude larger and its focusing system infinitely more precise than anything proposed for power generation. The beam delivered to a solar power plant is designed to be a diffuse, wide-area illumination, not a cutting laser. It is the difference between using a magnifying glass to warm a patch of ground and using it to set a single leaf on fire from a mile away. One is possible, the other is a physical improbability. Yet, the physics is often secondary to the power of perception. The fear of a weapon in the sky is a cultural and psychological hurdle that no amount of engineering data alone can overcome. This makes public trust the most critical non-technical component of the entire endeavor. Gaining that trust demands a foundation of radical transparency. Every aspect of the project, from its control systems to its safety protocols, would need to be open to international scrutiny. The mirror's operational software could be designed with unbreakable, hard-coded restrictions, preventing the beam from ever being focused, steered, or intensified beyond the strict boundaries of its designated solar farm. An independent, multinational oversight body would hold the keys, metaphorically speaking, with the authority to shut down the system instantly if any parameter was violated. The ground-based receiver itself would act as a final failsafe, programmed to close its aperture and shut down if the beam's signature ever deviated from its pre-approved safety profile. This is not about building a better machine, it is about building a system that is trustworthy by its very architecture. The conversation must shift from a debate about fictional superweapons to a shared understanding of a public utility, one whose safety is woven into its design and verified by the world. The success of this celestial partnership depends as much on our ability to communicate its peaceful purpose as it does on our ability to engineer its reflection. Guiding a city-sized constellation through the void demands a mind that never sleeps. This is the domain of a specialized artificial intelligence, the silent captain of the fleet. Human operators could never process the torrent of data or execute the split-second decisions required to keep thousands of individual mirrors perfectly synchronized. The AI's first and most critical task is celestial choreography. It must constantly calculate the precise position and angle for every single mirror in the constellation, not as a static formation, but as a dynamic swarm in constant motion. As the Earth rotates and the mirrors orbit, the AI is recalculating trajectories and reflection angles millions of times per second, ensuring that each beam of light remains locked onto its distant target. This is not a simple aiming exercise. It is a fluid dance where the stage, the dancers, and the audience are all moving at incredible speeds. The AI must also serve as the ultimate air traffic controller for its own fleet. It continuously monitors the orbits of every other satellite and piece of debris, predicting potential collisions years in advance and plotting gentle, fuel-efficient course corrections to keep its mirrors safe. Beyond navigation, this digital captain is also the chief engineer. It runs constant diagnostic checks on every component across the entire constellation, from the health of individual thruster nozzles to the microscopic degradation of each reflective panel. It uses predictive algorithms to foresee a part failing long before it actually does, scheduling maintenance or rerouting power to compensate for a weakened mirror. This system processes a flood of real-time data, from the atmospheric clarity measured by the ground station to the solar weather reports from monitoring satellites, fine-tuning the beam's focus to punch through a gathering storm. The entire operation hinges on this AI's robust and flawless autonomy. A single software glitch or a moment of hesitation could unravel the entire intricate ballet, turning a symphony of light into a chaotic and potentially dangerous scattering of energy. This reliance on a non-human intelligence forces a profound question. How much trust are we willing to place in the silent logic of a machine that holds the power of a second sun? While the concept of a mirror redirecting sunlight seems straightforward, it is distinctly different from another grand vision for cosmic energy, space-based solar power. Both ideas harvest the sun from orbit, but they represent two separate paths on the roadmap to a clean energy future. Space-based solar power is the more complex and ambitious of the two. It envisions constructing colossal satellites, essentially floating power plants the size of cities. These behemoths would be covered in vast arrays of photovoltaic panels, the same technology found in rooftop solar systems, but operating in the perfect, unfiltered sunlight of space. They would convert that solar energy directly into electricity right there in orbit. Then comes the most technologically daring step. This electrical power must be transmitted across the void to Earth. This is typically proposed using focused microwave beams or highly efficient lasers, which would be received by giant antenna farms on the ground, known as rectennas, that convert the energy back into usable electricity. This approach promises the highest possible efficiency because it completely bypasses the atmosphere's light scattering and absorption on the way down. The energy travels as a concentrated, easily managed beam. In contrast, the orbital mirror is a far more elegant and intermediary solution. It does not generate any electricity in space. It has no complex power conversion systems, no high-energy transmission hardware. Its sole function is that of a celestial relay, a simple, passive reflector that bounces raw, concentrated sunlight down to a waiting concentrated solar power plant on Earth. All the complex work of converting light into heat, storing that heat, and generating electricity is handled by the proven, ground-based infrastructure we already have. This fundamental difference in complexity makes the orbital mirror a plausible technological and economic stepping stone. Launching and assembling a massive, fragile mirror is a monumental challenge, but it pales in comparison to constructing a fully functional, multi-component power station in the harsh environment of space. The mirror could serve as a crucial testbed, proving our ability to build, operate, and maintain vast structures in orbit. It would validate the economic models for such colossal projects and drive down the costs of space-based manufacturing and assembly. Mastering the orbital mirror would provide the essential foundation of knowledge, experience, and infrastructure needed to one day attempt the even greater leap to full space-based solar power. One is the training ground, the other is the ultimate goal. By starting with the reflection of light, we learn the skills necessary to eventually beam pure power. Such a colossal structure could never be built on Earth. The sheer size of a single mirror, spanning kilometers across, makes it impossible to construct in any factory and far too fragile to survive the violent forces of a rocket launch. This forces a fundamental shift in our entire approach. The mirrors themselves must be born in the void, assembled piece by piece in the silent workshop of orbit. This leap transforms the project from a simple launch into the genesis of a new industrial revolution, one that happens off-world. It implies the creation of advanced in-orbit manufacturing capabilities, where robotic arms and autonomous assemblers become the construction crews. These machines would take raw materials, potentially mined from the moon or nearby asteroids, and transform them into the mirror's skeleton and skin. In the gentle embrace of zero gravity, they could carefully unfurl the vast, gossamer thin reflective films, a delicate operation that would be impossible under the crushing weight of Earth's gravity. This is not just about building a mirror, it is about building the very capacity to build in space. The development of this single technology would, by absolute necessity, force breakthroughs in automated space construction and off-world resource utilization. We would learn to live off the cosmic land, turning the barren rock of the moon into the steel beams and aluminum sheets for our celestial architecture. This process would ignite a brand new space-based economy, founded not on exploration alone but on production. The orbital mirror becomes more than a power source. It becomes the foundational customer for an entire industry that turns the raw materials of the solar system into the infrastructure for human expansion. This vision pushes us toward a future where space is not just a destination we visit, but an industrial park we inhabit. This grand vision unfolds on a scale of generations, not years. A full-scale orbital mirror network for Earth is not a project for the 2030s or 40s, but a plausible reality for the mid to late 21st century. The journey from concept to a functioning celestial sun begins not with a single, monumental launch, but with a series of cautious, incremental steps. The first phase would involve small-scale demonstrator missions, perhaps mirrors no larger than a tennis court. These pathfinders would have one simple job: prove the core technologies. They would test the delicate unfurling of their reflective films in the vacuum of space, validate the precision of their guidance systems by targeting a specific patch of desert, and measure exactly how much energy is lost as their beam travels through the atmosphere. A successful demonstrator paves the way for a larger prototype, perhaps the size of a city block, designed to power a single, small, concentrated solar plant for a few months. Each step builds confidence and refines the engineering, creating a technological ladder we can climb, one rung at a time. The speed of this ascent is tied directly to two powerful external forces: the continued free fall of launch costs driven by reusable rocketry, and the parallel explosion in autonomous robotics needed for in-orbit assembly and repair. This is not a race with a single finish line, but a steady, generational marathon of innovation. For Mars, the clock starts even later. The first Martian mirrors would likely only arrive after a permanent, self-sustaining human colony is already a reality, using the industrial base of that new world to support the construction of its own celestial infrastructure. This entire endeavor for both planets represents a profound test of human patience and collaboration. It demands a rare and sustained political will that can survive election cycles and economic downturns. It requires deep international partnerships that transcend earthly rivalries. Most of all, it needs a continuous, unbroken chain of technological evolution across fields from materials science to artificial intelligence. We are not just building a machine, we are building the future's capacity to build. The orbital mirror is a symbol of a civilization that plans not for the next quarter, but for the next quarter millennium. This energy equation is the ultimate judge of any grand project. We must ask a brutally simple question: does the mirror give back more power than it takes to create? The concept is known as energy return on investment, or EROI. For an orbital mirror, the upfront energy cost is almost beyond comprehension. Think of the immense industrial effort required to manufacture its ultra-pure materials in spotless clean rooms. Picture the colossal fuel burned by fleets of reusable rockets, each launch a controlled explosion lifting thousands of tons of hardware past Earth's gravity. Then factor in the decades of energy needed for station keeping, maintenance, and the global network of ground control. All of this energy is invested before a single photon is reflected toward a solar farm. A thorough life cycle analysis is not just a formality, it is the project's moral and economic compass. If the calculations show that the system must operate for 20 or 30 years just to break even on this embedded energy debt, then its value as a sustainable solution begins to crumble. It would be like spending a lifetime's savings to buy a car that only starts saving you money after you have driven it around the world 10 times. The entire enterprise only makes sense if the net energy gain is not just positive, but overwhelmingly so. This forces the design toward two non-negotiable goals: extreme longevity and near-total autonomy. The mirror must be engineered to function flawlessly for a century or more, its materials resistant to the slow degradation of cosmic radiation. Its maintenance must be minimal, relying on the kind of robust, self-healing systems that can operate without constant human intervention. The true sustainability of this celestial power source hinges on this long-term calculus, proving that the light it gives to our world is far greater than the shadow of its own creation. Power over light is power over life itself. The nation or corporation that successfully deploys the first operational orbital mirror network will hold a new form of influence, one that transcends traditional economic or military might. They would possess the ability to dictate the energy security of entire regions, offering the promise of limitless power or wielding the threat of its withdrawal. This is not merely an industrial advantage, it is a fundamental lever of geopolitical power. Imagine a future where one country controls the switch that keeps the lights on and the water flowing for its neighbors. Such a dynamic could reshape alliances and create unprecedented dependencies, transforming energy from a traded commodity into a tool of strategic statecraft. It is a scenario ripe for a new kind of space race, one driven not by the symbolic planting of flags, but by the urgent, tangible pursuit of energy sovereignty. Every major power would feel the imperative to develop its own celestial infrastructure, not to be left reliant on the goodwill of a competitor who controls the sky. This scramble could fuel innovation, but it also carries the risk of a fractured orbital environment with competing constellations and contested orbital slots. To prevent this future from descending into a zero-sum game for the Sun, a different path is essential. The technology must be elevated from the start as a global public utility, akin to the Internet or international waters. Its development and governance would need to be managed by a strengthened, transparent international body, perhaps a newly empowered United Nations Office for Outer Space Affairs. This entity would be responsible for licensing all such projects, ensuring equitable access to orbital paths, and mandating that the benefits of this celestial power flow to all of humanity, not just the nations that can afford to launch it first. The core principle would be to treat the light of the Sun as a shared human inheritance, preventing any single entity from turning our common star into a private asset. This is the ultimate safeguard, ensuring that the power to light our world from above becomes a unifying force for global cooperation, not the next frontier for human conflict. This power to reshape the fundamental rhythm of a planet forces us to confront our own intentions. We are not merely adjusting a thermostat, we are contemplating the permanent alteration of a global energy budget, a system that has nurtured life for billions of years. The ethical weight of this decision is immense. It asks whether our technological ambitions have been matched by a corresponding growth in wisdom. Granting a desert constant daylight might solve an energy crisis, but it also creates an artificial environment where the natural cycles of rest and activity are overridden by human design. We would be imposing our own industrial tempo onto an ancient ecosystem, and the long-term consequences for every plant, insect, and animal in that new, eternal day are largely unknown. This is not a choice we can make based on efficiency reports alone. It demands a wider conversation, one that includes the voices of ethicists who can question our motives, philosophers who can examine our relationship with nature, and the global public whose sky we would be altering. The most difficult questions extend beyond our own world. On Mars, the act of terraforming is an even more profound ethical leap. By deliberately warming the planet and thickening its atmosphere, we would be purposefully destroying the existing Martian environment, a pristine record of cosmic history. What if that red dust harbors its own simple, resilient microbial life, a form of existence we have not yet discovered? Wiping it out in the name of creating a second Earth would be an act of irreversible cosmic vandalism, the destruction of a unique biological genesis for the sake of human convenience. This forces a stark philosophical choice. Is a dead world worth more as a preserved museum of natural history, or as a living home for our descendants? There are no easy answers here, only deep and enduring responsibilities. The governance of such a technology cannot be an afterthought, it must be its very heart. The framework for its use must be built on a foundation of reverence for the natural order, a humility that recognizes that some powers are not merely to be used because we have them. The true test of this celestial mirror will not be its reflectivity, but our own reflection in it. beyond the cold calculus of kilowatts and carbon credits lies a deeper kind of power. This is not just a story of energy, but of identity. A project of this magnitude offers something our world desperately needs: a positive and unifying vision for our future. For decades, our narrative of space has been tinged with competition, a new high ground for national rivalries, but building a celestial power source for two planets flips that script entirely. It presents a challenge so vast, so inherently beneficial, that it demands global cooperation. No single nation or corporation could shoulder this alone. It would require a consortium of the world's brightest minds, a sharing of launch facilities, a universal standard for construction, and a treaty-backed framework for operation. This is not a venture that divides us, it is one that forces us to unite. The logistical hurdles themselves would become a global classroom, driving an unprecedented surge in scientific and engineering education as countries race to contribute their expertise. It would give an entire generation a shared, uplifting goal, a collective project that affirms our capacity for creation over destruction. This is the modern-day equivalent of building the Great Pyramids or landing on the moon. Those ancient structures were testaments to a civilization's organizational genius and unwavering belief in a higher purpose. A network of orbital mirrors would be our pyramid, a silent monument in the sky declaring that when we choose to, humanity can accomplish the impossible. It is a statement written in reflected sunlight for all to see, a simple, powerful message that we are, at our best, a species of builders. From the silent deserts of Earth to the rusty plains of Mars, we have traced the outline of a future written in reflected light. This journey has taken us through the intricate physics of aiming a beam across the void, the daunting engineering of structures that must assemble themselves in orbit, and the complex economics of an investment that spans generations. We have confronted the profound ethical questions that arise whenever we choose to reshape a world, and the geopolitical realities of a power that literally comes from the heavens. The path to turning this vision into reality is undeniably long, paved with technical hurdles and demanding unprecedented global cooperation. Yet, the potential reward shines with a clarity that cuts through all complexity. A future where clean, abundant energy is not a scarce commodity, but a permanent foundation for human civilization on this world and the next. This is more than a power source, it is a challenge to our very identity. It dares us to think on a grander scale, to collaborate beyond old borders, and to engineer with a wisdom that matches our ambition. The sun offers its power in a ceaseless, generous stream. Our task is to learn how to hold up a mirror. What role do you believe we should play in shaping this future? Share your thoughts in the comments below and subscribe for more explorations of tomorrow's technology.